In this video, I'm going to go through the setup and the rules for LSAT Prep Test 32, Game 1. And in particular, I'm going to be looking at the last rule where we have the word unless pop up. And if you watched my last video, you'll see that we can replace unless with if not. So this will give us some practice doing that. All right, so the setup here. Of the 8 students, George, Helen, Irving, Kyle, Lenore, Nina, Olivia, and Robert. I have all 8 there, yes. Of these 8 students in a seminar, exactly 6 will give individual oral reports during 3 consecutive days. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And we're going to have 6 of them give reports. So 2 of them won't give any reports. So that'll be our out group. Exactly 2 reports will be given each day, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon. So let's do AM, PM. All right. And so we have to fill all of those 6 spots, and our out group will be the 2 remaining players. Okay, so fairly complex for game 1, but this is from Prep Test 32, right? So it's an older test, so the kind of pattern of making the games like harder as you go on from game 1 to 4 hasn't really been solidified yet. And maybe the questions are a little bit easier. Yeah, and we'll see. So Tuesday is the only day on which George can give a report. So George cannot give a report on Monday or Wednesday. George could give a report on Tuesday. That's the only day on which George can give a report. Does that mean George has to give a report? No. George could still be out. Okay, so George either gives a report on Tuesday or George is out. This is probably the simplest way of annotating that rule, but you could also say that if George gives a report, right, if George is in, then George gives a report on Tuesday. If George doesn't give a report on Tuesday, then George is out. Okay. Oh. All right, rule 2. Neither Olivia nor Robert can give an afternoon report. So in the afternoon, we can't have O, we can't have R. Fairly simple there. Again, doesn't mean that they have to give reports in the morning. They could be out, right? They might not give reports at all. But they definitely don't give reports in the afternoon. So far, Monday and Wednesday afternoon are the most limited because we've eliminated O, R, and G from those 2 spots. All right, so we've added rule 1. Or sorry, we've added rule 2. We've also added rule 1, but we just added rule 2. All right, for 3. So yes, I see the word unless. I also see the word if, right? So how are we going to deal with this if we've got 2 big conditional indicator words here? One of them, unless, we usually would replace that with if not and start there. But then we also have this other if-then statement as part of the same sentence. So let's figure this out. All right, if Nina gives a report, so I'm just going to start from there as if it's like a normal if-then statement. If Nina gives a report, so if N is in, that's how I would write that. Then on the next day, H and I must both give reports. Okay. All right, unless Nina's report is given on Wednesday. So we've got this whole if-then statement, and then unless, but then there's the unless, right? So it's this relationship unless Nina's report is given on Wednesday. So If Nina's report is not given on Wednesday, then we're going to go by this. If Nina's report is given on Wednesday, then we won't go by this. Okay, so what we can still do is we can still start with unless and say if N is not giving a report on Wednesday, then if N gives a report, right, it would be on either Monday or Tuesday, and H and I would be after it. Okay, so if N gives a report on Wednesday, this rule wouldn't be triggered at all, right? That would be like the exception, right? So this relationship, this conditional relationship where if N gives a report, these other two players have to be the next day, that's not going to apply, right? It's not going to be triggered if N gives a report on Wednesday, which is a good thing, right? Because if N gives a report on Wednesday, there isn't a day after it that H and I can be on. Okay. So that's how we would interpret this rule. In terms of creating a contrapositive, right, then we're kind of looking at saying, well, if N gives a report but H and I are not after it, then N has to be on Wednesday, if it's going to be in at all. Like, that's the only way to make that work, right? Which kind of makes sense, right? So if we know N gives a report, but we know, for example, that like H is out or I is out, then N would have to give their report on Wednesday, because otherwise we would be breaking this rule. Okay, so this one's pretty complex, but what we're looking at is an if A then B unless C. How do we deal with that? Well, we write this out like a normal rule, and then we say that's going to be triggered if we don't have C. So if we don't have C, then that rule will be triggered. If C is present, then we're not going to really be worried about this rule. And if we can't fulfill this rule, then we would think, yeah, C is present. So that's sort of where the contrapositive comes in, right? So if for some reason we can't fulfill that whole rule, then that's what's going to lead us to say that C must be true, right? So if the rule isn't in play, we must be dealing with the exception to that rule. So I would just look at it as either, you know, I mean, if N is out, then we don't even care, right? Then whatever, N is out, it doesn't matter. However, if N is in, either N is on Wednesday or we have H and I after N. Okay. Hopefully that helps clear it up. If there's a specific question for this one, when you go through it, where you feel like you're having trouble completing the question because you're not understanding Rule 3, please let me know. I'd be happy to make another video explaining that.